All right. All right. Welcome to Progressive Democrats of LaPorte County's Candidate Forum for U.S. Congressional Candidates, Pat Hackett from Indiana Congressional District 2 and Frank Mrvan from Indiana Congressional District 1. So we're going to get right to it, and we'll ask Pat to give us an opening statement, and in about 3 minutes would be delightful. There's Pat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, all of you, for joining us this evening. I'm very happy to be speaking with you and have the opportunity to have some discussion. So I'm Pat Hackett, and I'm running for Congress in Indiana's 2nd Congressional District because I believe in dignity and justice for all, not the few. That is the core commitment of our country, and we need to reclaim it. We also need to reclaim the people's house. The House of Representatives is the people's house, and we need to reclaim our voice and values in Washington now more than ever. And I want to be the representative of the people of my district to further that effort. I'll tell you a quick story. Some of you know when I ran in the midterms, I mentioned this, that one of my earliest political experiences, 2nd grade, first primary, we voted in the primary, and all the children in the 2nd grade voted for Bobby Kennedy, who is an extraordinary human being. And at the advice of my father, I voted for Hubert Humphrey. And I call that to mind because Hubert Humphrey was a happy warrior. And I feel like I've gone full circle now in my life. And I'm a happy warrior, and that I am happy, and that I believe that life is purposeful. It's driven ultimately by love and joy, but I'm a warrior in that we are in a grave and serious moment in our country, and we need good leadership. And we need good leadership in our district. And I'm seeking to replace the current representative, Jackie Walorski, who's been endorsed by Donald Trump, is aligned with the extreme views of the Trump-Pence administration, and is kept in office by outside corporate PACs and does not represent the interests of the people. So it'll be a stark change when I am the representative for the 2nd Congressional District. And there are certain priorities that I do have in my campaign, but also when I am the representative of the 2nd Congressional District. One of those priorities is to reclaim the goodness of the district and bring that to Washington. Washington and our government needs the goodness of our district, our Hoosier hospitality, our work ethic, and an ethic where all are welcome at the table. It's essential to our renewal. And 3 priorities I will further as your representative. First of all, in healthcare. I believe healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and so I support universal healthcare coverage, and we talk about how we get there. I also believe that it's essential that we end the stratification of wealth in our country, and that we have an economy that works for all of us. And I'll talk about that. And then third, reclaiming our democracy's commitment to evidence, science, and reason, which are the building blocks of the rule of law, which are currently under assault with the current administration, fostered by Jackie Walorski. And then also the disastrous response to COVID-19 is due to the lack of commitment to evidence, science, and reason, and also the disastrous response to climate change. And so we have to reclaim that commitment. And I'm running for the legislature, which is the branch of government that makes laws, that has oversight of the administration, the regulatory bodies. And it's essential that we have good people, competent people in the legislature. And we've not had that in our district for too long a time. So I'm very excited about the campaign. I look forward to talking with you and answer any questions you may have.
All right, thanks, Pat. All right, so Frank, if you could also then give us a nice, we're hoping 3 minutes-ish introduction.
Yes, I'm Frank Murvan, and I want to thank everyone for putting this on, and absolutely the participation in the event. And I am a Democratic nominee for the first congressional district in Northwest Indiana. It comprises of Lake County, Porter County, and of course, LaPorte County, Michigan City, and Westville. So a little bit about me is I've currently served as the North Township trustee for 15 years, and I represent the cities of Hammond, Whiting, East Chicago, and Highland and Munster. And what I've done for 15 years is what is very topical right now in our history. I have advocated for and helped provide and stabilize people who are facing financial emergencies. So those who have lost their jobs because of work stoppages, those who have lost their jobs because of the global economy, those individuals who struggle each and every day to try and provide for themselves, them working men and women, we have found ways to stabilize those homes. We've worked with the labor unions. We have worked with individual groups and educational components to make sure that people are well trained for the next generation of jobs. And ultimately, I am running for Congress to be able to make sure that we as an economy get back on track. So we have an unemployment rate that is hovering right around 16 or 17% based on COVID-19. My grandfather came over from Czechoslovakia and ended up in East Chicago and worked at Inland Steel for 46 years. The steel industry is a driving part of our economy. And my intentions are very straightforward. I intend to make sure we protect the global market, to make sure that we keep producing steel. We level the playing field so that the men and women in our manufacturing bases have the capacity and the ability to be able to work and provide and most efficiently produce the most amount of steel possible. And in the global pandemic, we have lost jobs. And I know the dignity of work. So we have to work on the manufacturing base. We also have to be able to recruit white collar jobs and work with our educational components. And also as the first congressional district nominee and a candidate for Congress, on a quality of life, I want to make sure that we protect our lakeshore. I want to make sure that we are doing everything that we possibly can to make sure our environment, our water and air, our water is drinkable and our air is breathable, and that we do not punish poor communities and that there is not environmental injustice going on. So the time has come where the EPA allows big business and big corporations to be able to monitor themselves, where we have a member of Congress that says, these are the guidelines, this is what we're going to follow, and this is what the environment, clean air and clean water should be about. A little bit about me backtracking is I married my high school sweetheart, Jane. I have two children, Genevieve, who is 17, who's a senior in high school, and Scarlett, who is a 8th grader. And, they're very important to me. So, women's issues and women's rights and making sure that they have the ability to equally gain the same employment and equally gain the same income is also equally important to me. And so we're going to advocate to make sure, because I have been on the front lines of poverty, that we break the chain of poverty through access to healthcare, through the expansion of the Affordable Care Act, making sure that those who have given up pay raises and pay increases to have their health insurance, that they're able to keep it, but yet doing our very best to create a system, not Medicare for all, but Medicare for all of those who are in need, to be able to expand the system and make sure that those individuals are covered. In a lot of part of the communities that I represent, this COVID-19 is something that has gratefully impacted them, and access to healthcare has shown importance. So has the ability of the health insurance following your job. But if you lose your job, then you fall into this gap. We have to create a system that is better than that. And
All
so
right, we'll get back to that a little bit more. Okay, we're out of time. Sorry, we're not able to give you the benefit of cues. So I'm sorry. So we'll come back with some questions. I'm going to start with Pat, and I'm going to ask Pat our first question. Are you ready? So this one is about the economic recovery plan, and our question is, what are the important priorities that you will pursue as the U.S. representative for your district to ensure an equitable and vibrant economic recovery for Hoosiers?
Well, it's a great question, and I bring my answer to this is informed not only by my values but my experience. I think as I'm a teacher, I'm a small business owner, so I understand economic realities, and I'm an attorney and a commitment to justice. And economic recovery and how we achieve equity. Well, one thing we need desperately in the moment, one priority is we need a coherent national health policy. In the context of our current pandemic, we see that it should be the scientists and doctors driving our policy, not politics. And our economy will not recover as long as Americans are sick and dying and afraid, that schools cannot open coherently and businesses cannot open coherently because of incompetence and politicking around health issues. So that's critical. We have to empower the CDC. That's going to be an actual economic priority as well as health priority when I'm in Congress, and preparation for events such as this pandemic. Secondly, we have to focus in our economic policy on the common good and end the stratification of wealth which exists in this nation. That is gutting and destroying our democracy and our security in our country. So I would promote responsible capitalism, which would really focus on not only corporate shareholders and management, but get workers back at the table, and corporate community commitment, which is essential. We need to, one of the other priorities I would bring is responsible tax policy. We have to repeal the disastrous gift to the wealthy that occurred in late December 2017. And we have to have a responsible tax policy in terms of wealth tax and bring economic health across the board to Americans. You can't have a healthy economy with wealth stratified in just a few holding that wealth and then everybody else. Part of that also then in economic health is reinvigorating, and federal legislature plays a critical role in organized labor and getting the worker back to the table. So that's essential. Our infrastructure rebuild from a green perspective will be essential to our economic renewal. So, and incentives in the local national exchange incentives to local communities, especially to foster the growth and development of minority-owned businesses. So those are some of the priorities that I think are essential to equitable and vibrant recovery out of this pandemic.
Great, thank you. Okay, sorry, now we have to find, where did he go? Where did you go, Frank?
I'm right here.
Well, I'm gonna find you. There you are. Sorry. All right, so let me read the question again, Frank, so you can hear it again. Okay, what are the important priorities that you'll pursue as a U.S. representative for your district to ensure an equitable and vibrant economic recovery for Hoosiers?
Debbie, as I mentioned in my opening, the most important thing is the dignity of work and making sure that our economy is back on track. And so the first investment that I think the federal government should make is in ourselves with the infrastructure and making sure that we repair our crumbling roads, our bridges, our waterways, to make sure that we're investing in the workers. And then once we do that, once we invest in the crumbling infrastructure, then we get out of the way and allow private businesses and private equity to be able to go to work and develop those areas. So what we have to do is focus on that. Secondarily, as a priority, is you've got to be able to understand the COVID-19 economy, and we've got to get people to work, and we have to be able to protect them. And we also here in Northwest Indiana have the expansion by Congressman Pete Visklowski, the expansion of the South Shore and the double tracking of the South Shore, which is a huge economic project in our area. It's $1 billion investment. Not only that, what that does is it also brings the transit-oriented development investment that allows us to be able to have businesses and tax incentives to bring businesses in. And so that is a priority of mine. Also, candidate Pat also mentioned, I think it's extremely important, access to equity, private equity by minority groups is extremely important to me when it comes to the economy, and making sure that as a federal government, we make sure that there's access to entrepreneurial programs and making sure that people know what is out and available, and making sure that we encourage privately equitable investments in our communities. And, you know, the lakeshore and the development of the Marquette Plan is also equally important to make sure that economically we're protecting the lakeshore, and economically and environmentally we're making sure that it is vital. So in the big picture, you also want to make sure very quickly, as I mentioned in the beginning, not to be redundant, when it comes to economic turnaround in the first district, the first congressional district, making sure that we're protecting the steel industry, making sure that we're working with our assets such as the Port of Indiana, and making sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure, bring in educational components that are training people for the next level of jobs.
Great. So, and Frank, we'll go ahead to the next question. We'll stick with you. So we're just changing up the order a little bit. So this next question is about access to healthcare. How will you address the lack of accessibility and affordability of healthcare for Hoosiers as our U.S. representative?
Well, absolutely. As I mentioned, day in and day out for the last 15 years, people have come to us who had no option. And so we were able to work with the federally qualified health centers to make sure people had access. So it's 3 points that you absolutely positively you want to work on, and it's affordability, making sure people have the options. And as we talked about, not Medicare for all, but Medicare for those who are in need of it, to make sure that they have access, and making sure that the VA is an option for individuals. And what I mean by that is veterans have the option to be able to go to the VA, receive the services necessary, and also that they are geographically located so that not everyone is going to Jesse Brown. And so when you talk about access to healthcare, you want to make sure that things are affordable. And in our markets, we do that by making sure that we're uplifting the Medicaid system to be able to have the same standards of those who have given up on their healthcare or given up on their pay increases to be able to have healthcare that are provided for them. And so our system has to be equitable and has to be able to provide for that. And I do believe healthcare is a right, and that we should be able to figure out a system that provides for them. Also, which is equally important to me when we talk about healthcare, is mental health access. If you want to break the chain of poverty, you want to be able to, as a federal government, make sure that there is mental health access and that it's covered in a Medicaid system that allows individuals to get the help that they need. And those are the priorities of what we'll be fighting for when it comes to healthcare.
That's excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Pat, same question. Would you like me to read it again?
Sure.
Okay. How will you address the lack of accessibility and affordability of healthcare for Hoosiers as our U.S. representative?
Well, one thing I will not do is what the current representative has done, which is over 60 times vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act or to deny a reduction in prescription costs. In other words, literally taking healthcare away, healthcare coverage away from Hoosiers. I believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. I want to say it again because that has to really deeply impact our policy. It's a right, not a privilege. And if we believe that as a nation, we must move towards universal healthcare coverage. Healthcare is a public good. And this is not a new idea. Franklin Roosevelt was talking about this for the Second Bill of Rights when he was president. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Universal healthcare coverage. I will defend the Affordable Care Act, but we need to move, as the other developed nations have done, to universal healthcare coverage. We need to have a healthy population. And the disaster, the horror of COVID-19 shows the problem with our healthcare system right now. Persons who for too many years have not had access to healthcare have literally are dying from COVID-19 because of pre-existing conditions or poor health, overall lack of access to healthcare. That's inexcusable in a developed nation. We have the least efficient healthcare delivery system in the world of developed nations. And so it makes economic sense, it makes moral sense. It is a perspective of reverencing life, healthcare for all, not the few. And we can move, there have been proposals in the legislature for a long time. We can move toward that, roll that out over a term of years just by reducing eligibility, cover children right away. All should have coverage regardless of employment status, regardless of pre-existing conditions. And I'm speaking as a small business owner. The current system is such, one of your biggest increasing populations are the underinsured. People who have plans where the deductibles, the out-of-pocket are so high, they can't afford their coverage. You have to get the profit component out of the delivery of healthcare and access to healthcare. You have to get that out of there. We're talking about a public good. Also, by doing this and moving in this direction, you will develop new markets in areas now underserved because healthcare providers don't see that they would be compensated for their medical services. Now you'll be creating new markets you'll be increasing the health of the population, which will have great economic benefit to the nation and enormous moral benefit to the nation.
That's all right. Excellent. And so, Pat, we're going to move right on to the next question. And before we do, I just want to mention how interesting this is to have congressional candidates from these two very different districts. And I just note such a different, such a different approach. Your district has been Republican for quite a while. INO1 has been Democrat for quite a while. And so it's interesting. I can just hear the difference, and I hope that people will start to think about, working with these two districts together, trying to get both of these districts to be flipped to Democrat. I mean, one already is, but I think it's just interesting to see the difference. Okay, I'm going on to the next question, Pat. This one is about environment and climate change. So as a U.S. representative, what will be your top 2 or 3 specific policy priorities to address climate change and environmental protection?
Well, it's a both and. It's environmental protection and it's addressing climate change. And Congress has an essential role to play in this. With respect to the EPA right now, the current administration and the current representative from the 2nd Congressional District has a horrific record on the protection of our water, our air, the health and safety of the persons she's supposed to be serving. And so one of my priorities will be to reattend to clean air, clean water, and the oversight role that Congress must play with the EPA. One specific priority is obviously the contaminants particular to our district and our communities, lead poisoning, for example. We've got to invest and promote the health and safety, not only of our children, but all of our citizens. And that is a particular problem within District 2. There are others as well, but that certainly is essential. And then with respect to climate change, right now we've got a representative who denies the reality of climate change. She applauded when Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. So what I will do is obviously legislate from the perspective of responsible policy to address the realities of climate change, consistent with the principles of the Green New Deal in terms of carbon neutrality. We have to have organized labor at the table. We can't leave impoverished communities or minority communities out of this initiative because they're most harmed by climate change. We have to get our farmers to the table. My district, my 10 counties is rural and urban. You have to bring both perspectives to the table. And so I will be a representative who will move and promote efforts to re-engage the international community. The United States should be a leader, not an obstacle to addressing the very real reality of climate change, which is deeply, we already see the impacts of this on our farms in our district. And this is again, we're talking about a moral responsibility as well as a legal responsibility. So I think that those would be the priorities from a 30,000-foot view that I think that we need to be addressing. And it'll be a stark contrast to what the people of this district currently have.
Thank you. All right. Okay, Frank, we're going to move to you. And the same question. As a U.S. representative, what will be your top 2 or 3 specific policy priorities to address climate change and environmental protection?
Well, the first issue that you have to be able to overcome is make sure that people understand the science and that this is real and that climate change is absolutely positively going on. I apologize for the disruption.
That's right.
And so ultimately what you want to be working on is making sure that people understand the impact of climate change. And as I mentioned from the very beginning, we want to be able to protect our lakefront, protect our air, but climate change and our carbon imprint. So when we talk about the South Shore, the extension and double tracking and the carbon imprint, what you're doing is you're reducing the carbon imprint. And so there are a lot of environmental groups, young and old. So I talked about my 2 daughters. I want to be able to leave an environment that is clean for them, that they're able to survive and live and be able to breathe clean air and water and be able to have that type of ability. So as a member of Congress, what you also want to do is, if you capitalize everything, there's such a thing as called the blue-green deal, where the United Steelworkers and the different environmental groups came together and said, give us a seat at the table. And if you give us a seat at the table, we'll be able to produce the next generation of products manufacturing-wise when it comes to new energies and being able to produce new energies. So when you combine the ability to bring and talk about climate change, then you're able to create new jobs and be able to create new energy, alternative energies and sources of energy. But if we're manufacturing those within the 1st District and in the steel mills and in Indiana, then we will be better off.
Excellent. Okay, and then we'll stay with you for our next question as well, Frank. And this one's on criminal justice. What policy initiatives will you pursue as U.S. representative to ensure equitable policing and equitable criminal justice outcomes?
So my best experience that I can talk about with this that we've been doing over a year and a half is at the North Township Trustee's Office. So as the economy got better here in Indiana, for a very long time, it was looked upon that the township was a burden to the state of Indiana. And they looked to abolish, Mitch Daniels a while back looked to abolish the townships. And so I've always had the pressure of wanting to make sure that we had value in the community. And something that we did when we talk about criminal justice, and this will all tie in together, is we partnered up with IUN and we partnered up with other communities here in the 1st District. And we were able to produce a rapid response team to issues. We had a team of 4 individuals that had masters in social work. And so as the police departments would go on calls for addiction, or the police departments would go on calls for escalation or domestic violence or escalation in a home with autism, they would refer those cases to us at the Township Trustee's Office, where our social worker rapid response team would take those upon and find all the social services that are necessary to be able to de-escalate that situation. I bring that up because I do believe that's the wave of the future, and that's something that we've done over the last, I'd say, about 16 months. And so when we talk about the criminal justice system and policing, we want to be able to talk about alternative solutions. Because when policemen are trained, they're trained to be able to serve and protect. And when social workers are trained, and we understand that in the master social works, there's success stories of us working with people to be able to get protective orders, us being able to work to get them to domestic violence shelters. Those are things that free the police up to be able to do that. And it takes that pressure and psychology of that pressure off the policeman. And that, I believe, is the wave of the future, that is an equitable way of treating crime. And when we talk about the justice system, we have to be able to talk about fair and just laws, and we have to be able to make sure that all of the communities are being heard and that we are working towards common goals that bring justice to all.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay, Pat, same question about criminal justice. What policy initiatives will you pursue as a U.S. representative to ensure equitable policing and equitable criminal justice outcomes?
Well, to start with equitable criminal justice, one of the things I think we need to be doing at the federal level is to ban for-profit prisons and significant reform of sentencing reforms, particularly at the federal level. We also have to have initiatives, and this certainly can come through committee work and legislation, to take a good look at the categorizations of crime from a culturally competent perspective, because obviously that has been used in a discriminatory manner on the classifications of offenses or substances, obviously, particularly to the detriment of people of color. And that we have to end that, and I think Congress actually can play a very important role in that. At the congressional level, we need federal oversight of the Justice Department. We have a disastrous Attorney General right now, and again, our current representative has said nothing critical of him. He actually does not believe in the rule of law, and he has gutted the role of the Department of Justice in enforcing civil rights violations, particularly in the areas of race and sexual orientation. One area, for example, violence against trans individuals. I mean, this is just an appalling failure at the federal level that Congress has a very critical oversight role in that. We need federal incentives to local communities for diversity and bias training and education, not only to our within our police forces, but also within our courts and our prison systems overall. There's much that the federal government can be doing. And with respect to police, I think that we need to use federal funds to promote the demilitarization of the police. That's essential. And then also to provide the resources that our police departments require and our communities require to provide the social services that are not being met, that are creating much of the difficulty that we're seeing in our communities today. So there are a lot of opportunities to work in this area, in both the area of justice reform and equitable police practices. And this is to the betterment of the police departments. It's to the betterment of the communities they serve.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, and we'll stick with you, Pat, then for our next question on fair wages. What can you do as a U.S. representative to ensure fair wages in Indiana in terms of gender and race equity, as well as wage levels that sustain families? And of course, we do have to note that today is Equal Pay for African American Women Day. So that means that women had to work all last year up until this day this year to make the same amount of money as a white male doing the same job in 1 year. So sorry, now I've distracted you. Let me read the question again.
No, it's fine. And I'm glad that you drew that to our attention this evening, the occasion on which we're considering this question. One thing we need to do for all Americans is we need a federal sustainable minimum wage, a fair wage. And, you know, you have numbers tossed around. The minimum would be $15 an hour. We are very far behind keeping pace with the cost of living. And so that is one thing. We need to do that for all workers. We also, again, federal legislation to support the right to organize and all the benefits that come with that. So I will be a robust supporter of organized labor from the floor of Congress. In terms of gender equity, race equity as well, actually, the Equal Rights Amendment it should have been passed a long time ago. We need the Equal Rights Amendment, equal pay for equal work. There are related laws that also impact fair wages, a just wage, healthy families, and fair housing is one. Actually, voting rights is one, so that people can be empowered to be sure to be able to select those in political leadership, roles of political leadership, who will work toward their best interests without discriminatory purposes. And so I think all of that is essential to supporting fair and equal wages for all.
Great. Okay. All right, Frank, same question. What can you do as a U.S. representative to ensure fair wages in Indiana in terms of gender and race equity, as well as wage levels that sustain families?
Again, as I mentioned, as a North Township trustee, this is an issue that I have faced where people have worked 3 jobs on minimum wage in order to make $30,000 a year and to be able to support their family. And so when we talk about this hits home for me because I've sat across the table from thousands of people who are struggling every day and working 3 jobs in order to be able to provide for them. And so when we talk about the minimum wage, absolutely, as a member of Congress, I'm going to focus on increasing the minimum wage. My father, who's a state senator for the last 4 to 5 years, has carried a bill in the Indiana State Senate to be able to increase the minimum wage to $10. But that is something that is extremely important to me because I know what it means to work 2,020 hours or 2,040 hours every year at 725 means you're making $15,000 a year. And when you have an average rent in my district of about $800, that's $12,000 going towards rent. And so you have to be able to put that in perspective on the cost of living versus what we're paying our employees. And so the minimum wage increase is a priority of mine. Also, the Paycheck Fairness Act. As we talked about, gender equal pay and pay for minorities is one of my absolute priorities. And the Paycheck Fairness Act allows us to be able to address that issue and making sure that individuals who are women and minorities are receiving the same amount of pay. And Pat hit the nail on the head. You know, labor unions have absolutely positively led the fight in making sure that men and women are able to make a livable wage and to be able to have a pension and be able to have health insurance. And so when we support the labor unions by making sure that we support the Davis-Bacon Act and making sure that that's not under attack and their right to collectively bargain and their ability to be able to unionize, then we are actually creating and sustaining jobs in our communities and protecting them and advocating. I have 2 daughters, like I mentioned. I want them to be able to go out into the community and work 40 hours to make the same as a male.
Excellent. Okay. All right. And then we will stick with you. This is our last question that we have prepared. So if someone has a question that they'd like to add, you can send it through the chat and we'll see if we can work it through to the candidates. Okay. So our last question then, Frank, is about higher education. What will you do as a U.S. representative to address the current untenable student loan debt among college graduates and the high cost of higher education?
Sure. More must be done to make it easier for individuals to receive an education or an apprenticeship. In the programs, you have to be able to make sure that they're accessible. So with the student loans, specifically, what we have learned during the pandemic is that the federal government all of a sudden looked at it in a different view. The president sustained or delayed payments of student loans. So that is a crack in the armor of the ability to make sure that people identify and at least acknowledge that in some instances it's unattainable to be able to do that. So what we have is we have thousands of people who are out of work who are attempting to pay their student loans. And so I'm not for forgiveness of them, but I am for projects that enable them to work for social services, to work for underdeveloped educational systems or undeveloped communities to be able to provide for them while you're making a livable wage, but you're able to have those employers and government entities pay into your student loan program. And the rising cost of education has to be addressed, and we have to be able to look at why that is. And now with everything, you know, just like I'm trying to evoke emotion talking to a phone as I talk to you so that hopefully you're ambassadors to go out into the community and support my candidacy. What I want you to do is to understand that our world may be going virtual. And when we talk about virtual education, is it is at the same expense if you're not a brick or mortar, if you're not living at the schools, then it may be a transition point. And we have to be able to examine that with a new economy and understand, you know, the debate of, well, a Harvard degree is still a Harvard degree if you're virtual or if you're not. Well, the fact of the matter is we've got to find ways to save money. And this may be another crease for us to be able to identify as a way to have an affordable educational programming for all of our citizens and residents of Northwest Indiana.
Excellent. All right. Okay, Pat. All right. Okay, same question, Pat. About higher education. What will you do as a U.S. representative to address the current untenable student loan debt among college graduates and the high cost of higher education?
Well, we need to move in the direction away from debt-driven higher education in the United States. That's a terrible economic model. And we see it in our young people in particular today, and then people actually who aren't as young who are still under the burden of educational debt. This actually is an economic crisis for the country. We have a whole generation, if my own experience with young people, they are delaying essential movements, if you will, within the community, such as They're not marrying, they're not buying homes, they're not staying rooted because they don't have the ability to get ahead because they are so heavily burdened by educational debt. So I would be looking at seriously a reboot on our current situation, particularly in light of the economic catastrophe created by the current administration's poor handling of COVID-19, that we would be looking at educational debt relief so that people can, from an economic standpoint, move forward. We need to, going forward, look toward public options, particularly through our community colleges, state universities, where people then can achieve higher education, a collegiate education, without incurring debt. And coupled with that is we need, at the federal level, robust investment in the vocational arts, in the trades, apprenticeships, Frank mentioned, particularly in light of our infrastructure rebuild. We need to have a both-and approach, but at the same time, we can't look at, when we're looking at an academic track, that high school at a certain point in time is what now, if you look at the international competitive circumstance we're in, what college is today. So we need to be doing take a both-and approach. So I also will just add, I think at the federal level, we must invest, and I will support this in Congress, in all the studies support this, early childhood education, the STEM disciplines in middle school, as well as then higher education and the vocational arts.
Excellent. All right. So two outstanding candidates from two rather different districts. Pat from a district that has been Republican for a long time, and Frank from a district that has been Democratic for a long time. We need to get both of you outstanding candidates elected, and I'm very excited about the possibility of that happening. So, all right. So Pat, we'll go ahead and start with you. I don't see any other questions coming in, but tell us just a kind of a closing statement, and of course, tell us how people can find you and what else your campaign has going on, and what we can do to help you get elected.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, many, many thanks, Deb, and all of you for participating. I'm deeply appreciative of this opportunity to speak with you. One big event we have coming up on August 26th from 6 to 7, we have a virtual conversation between Mayor Pete and myself. Pete has endorsed me and my race, and that's the first time Pete and I have been in a forum like that, and so I'm very much looking forward to that conversation. I would suggest, if anyone's interested in the campaign, and I hope you are, that you would go to pathackettforcongress.com. You'll have ways to sign up. There are many, many volunteer opportunities in the virtual space. You can volunteer from the safety of your home. If you're interested and able in investing in this campaign, I do not accept corporate PACs. In stark contrast to Jackie Walorski, it's essential that the individuals of my district and those who share those values invest in this campaign. So we have a wonderful team of senior staff and field organizers. So we'll be in the community virtually and to the extent we can personally. So it's a very, very important, critical time as we head towards November, in a circumstance where there have never been greater risks to the election process itself from the administration from within. So a final, just a couple remarks by way of closing then. Indiana District 2 deserves and needs a representative who will represent the people of the district, not outside financial interests, but also a representative who understands the need for the checks and balances. And here's a final point I would like to leave you with. You know, when you think about Congress, Congress is the branch of government addressed under the first article of our Constitution. Congress, we the people, I as your representative, we the people, we're not a down ticket candidate to the executive branch of the judiciary. We're an equal branch, and our founders put it at the very beginning of our Constitution because the emphasis is the authority under the Constitution of the people. And we must reclaim our voice, our values, and our authority under the Constitution. We are in a grave moment, and I, as a representative in Congress, understand that. We have to renew our democracy. Congress has a critical role to play in that process, and it will be one of my highest priorities to, if you will, exercise the constitutional muscle of the people of the district I represent from the floor of Congress. And many of you know, I love Eleanor Roosevelt, her wisdom. She said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." We must, as a people in this district and a nation, not consent. We have to engage our democracy if we are to preserve it. We are absolutely at a critical moment, both at the local level, nationally, and internationally. So thank you so much. I am very grateful to be with you this evening.
All right, thank you, Pat. All right, and Frank, if you tell us about your campaign, what's going on, what we can do to help you get elected.
Well, absolutely. First, I want to thank all of you for organizing this from the LaPorte Progressive Democrats. I find it very valuable to be able to speak to you and be able to get to know you. And our campaign is comprised of a lot of hard workers and volunteers and my family. And how you can get in touch with us is Mrvan for Congress on Facebook. You can also donate at Mrvan for Congress if you feel that you are of the giving nature. And we are always working hard in that regard. The most important part of this time in this election is to make sure that we're out going door to door, as Pat had mentioned, where we're able during the COVID-19 and being able to know the concerns of the people. But more importantly, what you need to know is what I've done and what I intend to do. My intentions are to make sure that we advocate for an economy that gets us back to work. And as we talked about, in an environment that protects our water and our air, and an EPA that has the teeth to be able to make sure that companies are investing in infrastructure so they're not, unfortunately, doing poison or ammonia in our waterways. And that when we talk about lead poisoning, that we understand that we cannot have that kind of distribution in our communities and be able to survive. And so as a member of Congress, I'm going to fight and advocate for those things. I'm going to fight and advocate for veterans to make sure that they have health care. I'm going to fight and advocate for people who are living on the margins, and as we talked about with a prevailing wage or a minimum wage, and to make sure that our unions are protected and allow them to protect jobs and create jobs. And also to be able to make sure we're on the cutting edge when we talk about climate control, and that we are absolutely positively talking about the science and the data that rules that, so people understand that. So as a member of Congress, I'm going to do those things, and I'm going to find like-minded individuals in Congress to be able to advocate for those causes. The time is now. These are very serious times. We have an unemployment rate between 16 and 19%. Our entire world is pivoting in the history of what is going on based on our economy, based on our reaction to a pandemic. And we need individuals who will go there with the experiences that I have to make sure that we are advocating for people, advocating for women's rights, advocating for our environment, and most importantly, advocating for labor and the steel industry, and making sure that people have access to healthcare and access to mental health. Those in a nutshell are things that I'm fighting for every day. And please join me at Mrvan for Congress on our Facebook page, or you can go online. And most importantly, the best thing you can do for me is say, hey, I saw him on the Facebook Live or on the Zoom meeting, and he is a servant leader, and he's going to make an impact in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. And thanks to both of you. And so we're going to have Steve Perkins, who's an instigator, mostly for us Progressive Dems, is going to wrap it up. Just tell us a little bit about Progressive Dems and tell us what's coming up, Steve.
Sure. The first thing to say is we want to thank these candidates for running.
Yes.
We can't have a vital democracy if we don't have good people willing to stand up in a contentious world and to stand for values and stand for ordinary people. So thank you, Pat, and thank you, Frank. I want to remind, sort of stating the obvious, I want to remind everybody that this is all about voting, and the first step in voting is getting registered. So to the extent to which you can work on registering voters, that would be really important. And then, of course, to vote yourself. Our website, progressive progdemlc.com. You can just Google Progressive Dems of LaPorte County, has information on registering voters and absentee voting. that can be helpful. Both of these two candidates deserve your time, talent, and treasure, and you need to decide where you can make the most difference. And, it depends a lot on where you live. And if you live in one district or another, you will probably want to work in that district. I do want to underscore, though, that Frank is likely to win. It's a district that's been Democratic for years and years and years and years. I think Visclosky.
Still working hard, though. Still working.
Yeah, we're for it. But
yes.
if there are people in the first district who live near the second district, think about hopping over the line and working with Pat. I mean, part of the first district used to be in the second district before gerrymandering. So think about where you can make the most difference and go make that difference. There is a Pat Hackett event coming up on Tuesday, the 25th. This is going to be an in-person event from 4 to 6. There we go.
There we go. There's your flyer. Great.
And we encourage people to get out and sort of experience politics the old-fashioned way in the flesh. I mean, everybody will be very careful about social distancing, but there's an opportunity to actually meet other political people and to hear more from Pat. Progressive Dems is committed to continuing this discussion about policy. What should the Democratic Party stand for, and how do we make the changes that will make a difference in the long haul? So we used to put on an issues forum every month, like a lot of things that came to a screeching halt with the pandemic. But go to our website and sign up so that you'll be on our email list, and we will keep communicating with you about what's happening. So you'll be in the know, and you'll have other opportunities to learn more about the issues and the candidates that can make a difference. And finally, if you're inspired to do so, the dues for Progressive Democrats are $15. And you can sign up again at the Progressive Dems website. On behalf of the organization, I want to thank the candidates, I thank the participants, and may hundreds of people view this on Facebook and be inspired to get involved. Thanks so much.
Great. All right, there we are. So good night. Thanks again, Pat. It's great to see you again. Great to see you, Frank, too. And hopefully we will see you all soon.
Excellent.